Hello and welcome to another Doctor Who Big Finish video. Yes, it's that time of month again when we look at the main range release, and this time it is the final story in the Kamelion trilogy, or if you want to really be pedantic, quadrilogy of stories which kicked off in Devil in the Mist and Black Thursday and Power Game, which I'll leave a link to a little card thing there to those two reviews, and I'll leave a link in the description below to those reviews if you want to check out my thoughts on those previous releases. So yeah, this story basically explains why Kamelion was shoved in a cupboard. Big Finish, everyone! Hey, yes, they're playing up to the classic Big Finish stereotype of basically going, we're going to explain some stuff what happened, because this story is really continuity heavy, so if you love your continuity, you're really going to like this story. And so this story is incredibly ambitious because it's only using Peter Davison, Mark Strickson, Janet Fielding and John Colcher as Kamelion, because they're voicing other characters and there is another person within it, but it's essentially a four-hander. So it's a bit like Scherzo in a way, but this story utilises, you know, Peter Davison, Mark Strickson and Janet Fielding in a very interesting way. Now obviously the story is by Jonathan Morris, who is a very prolific Doctor Who writer, and I think the last main range story he wrote was We Are the Daleks, which again, fan favourite, and what a brilliant audio that is. So without further ado, let's begin this story of how Kamelion got shoved in a cupboard. So let's look at the presentation of this
So
CD.
taking a look at the cover art, we have the Doctor Who logo there, then we have the two Kamelions there, we have the Doctor, Tegan and Turlough, and I guess behind there is the Locust, and we have this lovely orange cosmos background, which is rather nice. Kamelion Empire by Jonathan Morris. And the side of the release. There we have the little bio on the story, so do feel free to pause if you want to know more about the Kamelion Empire. Then we have the cast list, and the total running time being 120 minutes. So opening up the little leaflet, we have production credits there, advertisement for Doctor Who magazine, and a lovely cast photo. And then we have the next instalment in the main range, which starts the 7th Doctor and Mags trilogy, which will be very exciting to give that a listen to. And then we have the reversible cover there, if you want to change it to the Peter Davison. So the disc art is exactly the same for both discs. So what are my opening thoughts on Kamelion Empire? Well, I really enjoyed it. It wraps up Kamelion's story, explains why he's basically shoved in a cupboard and not mentioned again until Planet of Fire. And it also leads into the 5 Doctors. So like I said, this story is very continuity heavy. So this story does require full attention. It's not a story what you can just put on as background noise. It's a story what does require your, 100% focus. So the story itself does seem incredibly authentic to the 5th Doctor era, even down to the music, which is marvellous and is a highlight for the story for me. If you've heard my praise of Hour of the Cybermen, well, Kamelion Empire echoes the same sentiment, with it having that missing episode vibe with the visuals are lost, but the audio survives. So the story does feel like 2 separate stories in a way, with one overarching plot. And I will say this story does have an experimental quality, with only basically using the 4 members of the TARDIS crew, and it gets away with it due to the concept of the story. And I appreciate the story for its ambition, and this sort of ambition could only work within this story. So well done for Jonathan Morris for trying to do something a little bit different. And obviously, if you know me, I'm a big fan of the early Big Finishes because they're just so wacky and out there, and I appreciate that Jonathan Morris is trying to sort of do that in a way and try and go, right, let's try and tell this story a little bit different, shall we? And it works. Part 1. So basically we get the same scene from the end of Power Game, which is one thing I really like about the Kamelion Big Finish stories, is that they all flow into one. Similarly like the Hartnell era, so we have the Doctor trying to locate the signal, so we have a mystery of, what's transmitting the signal, are there other Kamelions out there, even though Kamelion thought he was the only one. And why is the planet gone to ruin? So the story offers some great character moments, not only for Kamelion but for practically everyone, as we soon see the Doctor and Kamelion split up from Tegan and Turlough. So this offers some great world building, with Tegan and Turlough exploring the planet, while Kamelion gives the Doctor a history lesson of his home world, learning about the society and Kamelion's masters, the Camille. We also learn about Kamelion's past, what was his purpose, but Kamelion is hiding something about his home. So this part does feel very reminiscent of a 1st Doctor story. So while you have all that heavy explanation going on the Doctor and Kamelion side of the story, you have Tegan and Turlough basically exploring the world, getting some wonderful moments together, them sort of running into the Grolls, who are these gorillas riding quad bikes. And we have a rather sinister moment when the Kamelions are all reactivated, with the part ending on a very strong cliffhanger. And overall it's an excellent setup and learning about the technology in the form of the Locust and the society that once was. So episode 1 does exactly what episode 1 should do. It's part 2. So this is when the story really utilises Peter Davison, Janet Fielding, Mark Strickson and John Colcher, with them playing other parts as they play the 4 sides of the Camille. So we have harmony, authority, liberty and chaos. So I think that's a really interesting concept, as this part is when the title makes sense. You know, it explains the empire the Kamelions had. So this is sort of the history of them and how they their society fell into ruins with their war. And this is when Kamelion's true purpose is fully revealed, which I will say is quite an interesting reveal. I think there are some quite nice revelations and twists involving Kamelion's character within the early half of this story. And that leads to a fantastic moment between the Doctor and Kamelion, because there's a bit of a conflict between them. You know, the Doctor saying, look, you'll never travel with me again. We learn more about the Locust, which I think is a pretty cool idea, and we learn about the origins of the Kamelions themselves. I told you it was continuity heavy, which may sound dull, but it's actually pretty interesting to get more of a backstory on Kamelion and why he was sent to Zarephath, and we learn, you know, who sent the signal. And the cliffhanger for this part is very tense with a surprise twist. So while you have all that sort of continuity stuff dropping off, we still have, you know, Tegan and Turlough still exploring the planet, which I think is wonderful. So it is nice, but you kind of have a bit more of a fun side with Tegan and Turlough's side of the story with the Grolls, while you have the more serious, you know, heavy explanation side of the Doctor and Kamelion. So it's a nice, well balanced episode in my opinion. Part 3. Now if this was a Hartnell story, this part would definitely be called War of the Minds. So we have a rather interesting resolution to the cliffhanger. So this part does go rather scientific as we travel back to the Kamelions' War, the day the Empire fell, which sounds rather chilling, as it's basically described as this dance, but it's done like chess with one Kamelion representing a planet. So we do see the sheer scale of their empire, because it's the way the sound design's done. It sounds like there are hundreds of Kamelions, and it's just quite chilling actually, and you kind of wish you could see it visually, because it just seemed like a very interesting idea, exploring, you know, the Kamelions' battle tactics. It's done rather well actually. Now this part does go rather psychedelic to an extent, which I guess, you know, works with the Fifth Doctor era rather well with, you know, the Mara stories, as we see the Doctor and gang basically facing chaos and his forces in the Battle of the Minds. So I think that it's very much the action episode, and despite only having 4 cast members, you genuinely believe that this part is full of life and danger. You know, no matter what direction they turn, you know, if they die in the dream world, then they die, and if they die in the real world, well, you guessed it, they die. So it's a bit like Amy's Choice in a way. So this part really puts Tegan in a tricky situation. So if you followed these Kamelion releases, you could say that it comes full circle, and the cliffhanger, oh boy, it's an explosive cliffhanger, and it's definitely one of those ones where you're like, ooh, how is that going to work? How are we going to get out of this one? It's a really good cliffhanger. It's probably my favourite cliffhanger of the story, so part 4, this part explains the new TARDIS console room in the 5 Doctors. Also, we have a rather nice little treat of the return of the secondary TARDIS console room, which in true Tegan fashion, she mocks, especially the mirror. So this part is very much confined to the TARDIS, with the crew trying to stop chaos. So if you love Invasion of Time, then you'll get a kick out of this part, because it does seem very reminiscent of the Invasion of Time, especially the latter half of the story with the return of the art gallery. And I will say Turlough is used very effectively within this episode. The story leads into the 5 Doctors rather well, with the Doctor and crew arriving on the Eye of Orion, and explains why Kamelion is put in a cupboard and not mentioned again until Planet of Fire, which is a rather nice in-joke for fans, with Kamelion going, you know, don't think of me, don't mention me. So this story, in my eyes, really does wrap up the Kamelion story rather well, in my opinion. The Doctor, Peter Davison, as you would expect, a wonderful performance. I really like stories where the Doctor is pushed to a breaking point, and this story really does have that, with the Doctor slowly losing trust in Kamelion, and by part 4 we have his sheer desperation to stop chaos. But before all that, we do have the classic Fifth Doctor being, you know, that youthful gent and, you know, delight in exploring and letting his curiosity get the better of him. I think that Davison does a fantastic job within this story. He really does shine actually. Tegan, played by Janet Fielding. Another wonderful performance by Janet Fielding, with Tegan really shining in episode 3, with us learning more about her family, and to see Tegan's arc with Kamelion go full circle, with Kamelion relying on Tegan's help. And it's great to see what started in Devil in the Mist is sort of come full circle within this story. We do have traditional Saki Tegan, with getting some great snappy dialogue, and she just has some really fantastic character interactions within this story. I think that Tegan, again, is a great addition to this story and really does shine. Turlough, played by Mark Strickson, again, wonderful performance. Now this story really does let Turlough shine. This is probably his best story within the set of Kamelion stories. So out of Devil in the Mist, you know, Black Thursday, Power Game and Kamelion Empire, this is your best story for Turlo. If you're a Turlo fan, this is the one you want to get, because Turlo is used to his advantage, especially in episode 4. We have him being, you know, very much a show-off. You know, he works incredibly well with the Grolls, with basically being Tegan's translator. You know, he's very logical and scientific, and this story even hints at his departure, so, you know, it even adds more to the continuity side, so it's a good way to do that, really. Kamelion, played by John Coleshaw. I just want to say well done to John Coleshaw, as he has done a marvellous job bringing Kamelion to life, you know, throughout these releases. So Kamelion very much acts as a storyteller, and I guess a bit of a tour guide explaining his world to, obviously, the Doctor, but obviously us, you know, the listener. So the story shows how far Kamelion has come, well, with understanding humans slightly better, and the story really does wonders with Kamelion. I feel like Kamelion within this story has some great character revelations, character twists. I feel like if you do get this story, you'll get a bit of a kick when you get those revelations, because they are certainly really unexpected, and the revelations make you feel like, of course, that makes perfect sense. It's done really well, and yeah, like I said, John Coleshaw, round of applause. He does a fantastic job voicing Kamelion, and obviously playing the various other characters within this release as well, playing Chaos. He does a fantastic job playing Chaos. On the Kamelion Empire, well, overall I think that this is a cracking listen. A story with only 4 cast members, but a story full of life and colour. Chaos is built up to be a great powerful villain throughout the story, which really adds the scale to the story, and it does exactly what it says on the tin. It concludes the Kamelion set of stories extremely well, with Kamelion not only being a danger to the TARDIS crew, but to himself. So this story really does add a lot to Kamelion, with his backstory, learning about his species, you know, which leads to some cracking concepts and themes being explored. And I did say that this story is very continuity heavy, which actually works in the story's favour, since you're explaining Kamelion, so you might as well add a few other bits of continuity. So you could say that that is unnecessary, you could consider it very unnecessary actually, but actually it comes across rather fun, and it works very well within the context of the story, especially the TARDIS. And the TARDIS crew, like I said, is really utilised within this story, and I feel like every character plays an integral part within this story. It's not like one character is pushed aside. I feel like all 4 cast members, or 4 characters, you know, really do play an integral part within this story and play their part, you know, to defeat Chaos, really, which I think is really nice. You know, especially Turlo. I think that, you know, Turlo's kind of been sidelined in a few releases within this trilogy or set of stories. So it's nice that Turlo did have his sort of moment to shine within this story. So, yeah, I'm going to give this story a 9.5 out of 10. I feel like this is a story you will definitely enjoy on revisit. I feel like there's a lot to take in within this story, and I feel like, obviously, if you re-listen to it, you'll probably get more of an enjoyment out of it. So this story does have a great, you know, re-listenability to it, which is good, which is nice. And I feel like this, you know, does conclude the Kamelion trilogy very well. I feel like the set of stories within the Kamelion trilogy, or quadrilogy, like I said, is a great set. Devil in the Mist is quite a nice little introduction, reintroduction to that world, and it sets up some of the sort of arcs, what would be tied up within this. And then Black Thursday and, you know, Power Game are very slightly different, very traditional, you know, 5th Doctor 2-part stories. So yeah, I've really enjoyed these Kamelion set of stories, and like I said, I really like how they all flow into one, that it does feel like this is one continuous story in a way, and I really do like that factor. And obviously the continuity side, like I said, it may come across unnecessary, but actually it makes perfect sense within the grand scheme of things within this story. So yes, like I said, Kamelion Empire, I'm going to give it a 9.5 out of 10. It is a story what does require your 100% focus. It's not a story what you can just have on the background, because I feel like there is a lot to digest and take away from this story. And yeah, I think that it's a wonderful one. So yeah, 9.5 out of 10 for the Kamelion Empire, and it's probably my favourite from the Kamelion quadrilogy. I think that it's the perfect conclusion. So yes, that concludes this review of the Kamelion Empire. I hope you have enjoyed it. So I best go and watch Greatest Show in the Galaxy, ready for Mags's return. So I'll see you in the next Big Finish review, whatever that will be. So thank you very much for watching this video. Hope you've enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one. So thank you very much, and goodbye.